are these people?
So, Care Bear.
Yes, sir.
Who did 9/11? 9/11.
9/11.
Yay!
9/11 was bad.
It was bad. So we're gonna get into that. So I can close this now and back to here. So friend of the show, Kit Klarenberg, over here at MintPress News. Just like 9/11, suspicious Israeli stock market activity hints at foreknowledge of October 7th attack. Now, we've alluded to this during the show when this was going down, that we felt like they at least knew what was happening before this happened, right? Now there's some numbers that help us out with that, right?
The numbers don't lie, and they spell disaster for you.
Yeah, they do. So here we go. A new academic study has made a shocking and highly controversial finding. Suspicious Israeli stock market activity in the days preceding Operation Al-Aqsa Flood on October 7th indicates that a particular party had foreknowledge of the impending attack and used that information to directly profit from the panic that ensued. The paper, authored by Robert J. Jackson Jr. of New York University School of Law and Joshua Mitz of New York University School of Law, both of which pretty good schools, wouldn't you say, Care Bear?
I would say so, yes.
Concludes that based on a significant spike in short selling of listed Israel companies, persons unknown were aware the operation was impending and sought to profit illicitly. Short selling or shorting allows traders to bet a stock will perform poorly and reap rewards if they're correct. We're going to get into some detail of that in a bit. So, shorting is a relatively rare practice compared to traditional trading, and with good reasons. Losses can be vast if forecast poor performance doesn't materialize. Okay? And many investments advisors warn against engaging in the practice under any circumstances. Strikingly, though, the academics found shorting of Israeli companies in days immediately before October 7th, far exceeding short selling that occurred during numerous other periods of crisis, including the recession following the financial crisis, the 2014 Israeli-Gaza war, and the COVID-19 pandemic. Collin, what else do you know about shorting? There was a big bit of news not that long ago. Do you remember this? Particularly AMC movie theaters. That was shorting. So,
well, I don't know the term, but I do know, like, especially with COVID.
Yes.
Now I gotta be careful what I say.
Yeah. But more importantly,
like,
that was
like
Wall Street bets. You know about them?
Yes.
Okay, so that was them fucking up the shorting. Right? The shorts were already there. All they had to do was buy stocks in the company that was shorted so that the company had growth. And then those shorts get fucked and they lose billions of dollars. Right?
Right.
So, the pair argue this activity may reflect attempts by Hamas operatives to profit from, if not outright finance, their forthcoming attack. An allegation eagerly taken up by Hebrew newspaper Haaretz. Meanwhile, Israeli finance rag Globes attacked the study, claiming huge error by its authors in overestimating the profits of individuals who shorted Israeli stocks. The pair mistakenly quoted returns in agorot, a denomination of Israeli currency, as shekels, in pennies as dollars in U.S. terms, leading them to inflate investor returns by a magnitude of 100. Okay? That's what they're saying. So, yet the outlet acknowledged a consistent rise in short trading balances on Israeli shares prior to the outbreak of the war. Moreover, the Israeli government had taken the paper's findings so seriously that an official investigation had been launched to ascertain the truth. As we shall see, there is good reason to believe that if someone sought to enrich themselves due to foreknowledge of Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, it is likely they were connected to Hamas. This is why they're like, oh shit, someone made money. They're probably wanting some of that. But the paper notes numerous historical precedents for such activity, which occurs in gaps in U.S. and international enforcement of legal prohibitions on informed trading. Research on profitable trading on the basis of information about coming military conflict is an underdeveloped academic field. Such lack of oversight and scrutiny around shorting by Western regulators and watchdogs may explain who profited this time and why. The academics conclude our evidence is consistent with informed traders anticipating and profiting from the Hamas attack. Concerns about the paper muddling up profit totals aside, this finding is highly persuasive. Multiple datasets reviewed therein ample show and indeed significant spike in short selling in the immediate lead up to the Operation Al-Aqsa flood, and a supremely suspicious one at that. For example, the shorting of dozens of Israeli companies listed on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange increased dramatically before the attack. One firm alone saw 4.43 million new shares shorted from September 14th to October 5th. That's not that long, Collin. Couple months, right? So on U.S. exchanges too, there was a sharp and unusual increase just before the attacks in highly risky short-dated options being placed on Israeli stocks, which expired almost immediately after the attack started. So there's that graph, Collin.
Look at this graph.
So look at this graph with me, right? September 4th, right? We go to September. So where's that attack at, right? Going to be way over here.
Yeah.
Off the chart. So this is that. Look at this big spike. Literally at the start of October 1st. Bing, bang, boom. Right up there. 100% short volume. Right? So Desert Mantis saying this looks like my last EKG. I
hope not.
I think your rhythm is a bit irregular there then. So similarly, on October 2nd, the shorting of the MSCI Israel Exchange Traded Fund ETF, a passive investment vehicle tracking the performance of the Israeli stock exchange overall, suddenly and significantly spiked. For context, the authors note this was the 30th highest daily shorting volume ever experienced by the ETF over the 3,570 trading days leading up to Operation Al-Aqsa flood. In other words, it was one of the biggest bets on poor Israeli stock exchange performance since 2009. The shorting far exceeded the shorting of Israeli stocks at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, which briefly produced one of the biggest international stock market collapses in history. In March 2020, the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 2,000 points, effectively vaporizing trillions of dollars from the global economy in the biggest ever fall in intraday trading yet recorded. No wonder, the authors conclude, it is extremely unlikely that the volume of short selling on October 2nd occurred by random chance. Okay? Another particularly compelling finding in the identification of similar patterns in trading of the Israel ETF in April 2023, right when it has since been reported Hamas was planning to execute a similar attack. The strike would have followed what transpired in October closely, but was canceled after Tel Aviv publicly raised its national alert level due to Israeli intelligence agencies catching wind in advance. Almost like they were on their radar, right? Where have we heard that before? So look at this graph, Care Bear. Right? Short volumes. January, April, whop. Right? October, whop, whop, whop. Just all these big spikes here. Okay? So, just to reiterate, short selling a stock is when a trader borrows shares from a broker and immediately sells them with the expectation that the share price will fall shortly after. If it does, the trader can buy the shares back at the lower price, return them to the broker, and keep the difference minus any loan interest as profit, just for a little more detail on how that works. The attack was timed to start on the eve of Passover, April 5th. 2 days earlier, the shorting of the Israeli ETF peaked at levels very similar to those observed on October 2nd. The record volume was far higher by an order of magnitude than other days prior. This evidence strengthens the interpretation that the trading observed in October and April was related to the Hamas attack rather than random noise. Exactly who is behind this activity isn't yet clear from publicly available data. Their identities will nonetheless be known by the U.S. Financial Industry Regulatory Authority and the Securities and Exchange Commission, aka the SEC. The paper's author suggests these agencies delve deeper to understand why and how financial markets may have anticipated the events of October 7th. So let's get back to what we started at the top of this talking about, which is 9/11, right? So far, there is no sign of an official probe being launched stateside, although there are precedents for such action. As the paper records, following 9/11, the SEC looked extensively into whether particular market dynamics before that fateful day reflected advanced knowledge of the attacks. 3 years later, though, the commission reported it had not been able to develop any evidence suggesting that anyone who had advanced knowledge of the terrorist attacks sought to profit from that knowledge. Of course they didn't. The academics add that since then, 3 separate academic papers have probed the same issue, pointing to very different conclusions. In 2006, University of Chicago professor Alan Poteshman concluded the activity examined by the SEC was consistent with informed investigators having traded in advance of the attacks. In 2011, an international study team identified abnormal trading indicative of insiders anticipating the 9/11 attacks. In 2015, researchers from the University of Zurich confirmed unusual airline, bank, and reinsurer stock trading before 9/11. Okay? So, enter INN member, shut the fuck up, shitlib3, aka Joe. Right? Do you ever get a chance to watch this today, Care Bear?
No.
Okay, so I don't worry. I brought some snippets for you. I have the link to this in the description below. It's all the way at the bottom. Scroll down there. Watch this whole thing. It's 30 minutes. I mean, obviously, watch us first, but then go watch the full thing. But we're gonna watch some bits of it, and we'll get your thoughts, Care Bear. So let's start with this one. Let me full screen. Hello.
Let's talk a little bit about Israel.
That was Chucky the Shoom, by the way. But this is BB.
Saddam is hell-bent on achieving atomic bombs, atomic capabilities as soon as he can. There is no question whatsoever that Saddam is seeking and is working and is advancing towards the development of nuclear weapons. No question whatsoever. No question whatsoever. No question whatsoever.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere.
Sure they do.
Working with Israel to oppress the people of the planet. Order out of chaos, bringing the world crises, bringing them terrorism, so we'll accept a highly dictatorial police state regime. It's happening. We're going to have nuclear war because Israel likes to go around bombing everybody.
Alex Jones from 2001.
Now I'm going to talk about the Israeli connections to 9/11. Now, these were the strategic goals of the father of Israel, Ben-Gurion, who was another Rothschild employee. He said in 1948, after Israel became a state, he said we should go on the offensive and smash Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and then take out Jordan, Syria will fall, and if Egypt dares to resist, we'll bomb Cairo. This is the Prime Minister of Israel 1 week after the nation became a state. This is, of course, what Israel did to the United States. Many people say, oh, Israel wouldn't do that. They wouldn't attack us.
You know, back in the 1960s, they bombed the USS Liberty knowing it was one of our ships because it caught the radio chatter of them killing thousands of Palestinian children during that invasion, and they torpedoed it as they begged for hours on the radio, and LBJ sat there in 63 and let them do it. That's in this Baltimore Sun story.
Consequently, the Israeli terrorists even attacked American targets in 1954 in what is now known as the Lafan Affair, which occurred in Egypt. Israelis bombed American buildings there in an attempt to pin blame on Egyptians, hoping America would then wage war against Egypt. In June of 1967, the Zionists bombed Jerusalem, murdering over 300 civilians and killing entire families.
When I found out what they do, shooting little Palestinian children in the genitalia and laughing, it's on video. Little 10-year-olds walk around throwing rocks at tanks. A guy sits off a half mile away and blows their testicles off. They call them goyim. They call them dogs. They call the Arabs cattle.
So that was Alex Jones. In 2001, I know he has some different views now from what I hear, but back then had shit right.
Yeah.
But yeah, Indy's telling me that links are screwy because YouTube hates us. So this is Joe's pinned tweet on his Twitter. So if you go to @STFUShitlib3 on Twitter, this is right at the top. So give it a watch-sies. But you ready for the next one?
Sure.
I think I have 4 of these. They're short. So if you're on Rumble, which some of you are, go start telling me a couple of weeks and not a couple of months, as I missaid earlier. So here we go. Let's see what the Zionists had planned back then.
For the new Pearl Harbor. This was planned in advance. This man, Philip Zelikow, had a catastrophic terrorism study group in which they were imagining the transforming event that would change this nation.
I think this man is Richard Gage, by the way, the one speaking, who is a architect for, he runs the architects for 9/11 Truth, I do believe. So here you go.
This was published 2 years before 9/11. Another one of the authors was Ashton Carter, top left, and the man with the blue sweater. These are Rothschild agents. These men, when they wrote that paper, were working for a group called Global Technology Partners, which is an exclusive affiliate of Rothschild North America. Their whole business is getting onto the gravy train of American defense spending. That's where the money is. They take the money from us, they put it into war, and the Rothschilds profit from it. And another group was PNAC, Project for a New American Century. They said that the process of transforming the American military into this worldwide dominant force would be a long change, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor, which is exactly what 9/11 was meant to be.
Nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Who's behind it? Well, here we have a picture from the Pentagon. We have something called the Defense Policy Board. These are mostly Zionist men. Here we have Wolfowitz and Rabbi Dov Zakheim across the table, and the Israeli boy Douglas Feith, and they're sitting right next to the Israeli Chief of Staff in the Pentagon. And he's telling them, well, this is what you should do. And that's what we've done. They advise us, the Israelis tell our Pentagon what we should be doing. Now, a week after 9/11, this General Wesley Clark walked through the Pentagon. And he said, about 10 days after 9/11, I went to the Pentagon, I saw Rumsfeld and Wolfowitz.
One of the generals called me and he said, sir, you got to come in.
Democracy
you got to come in
Now?
and talk to me a second. I said, well, you're too busy. He said, no. He says, we've made the decision we're going to war with Iraq. This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, we're going to war with Iraq. Why? He said, I don't know.
I came back a few weeks later, he said, and by that time we were bombing Afghanistan. And he said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And the general said,
he said, I guess they don't know what else to do. So I said, well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda? He said, no. He says, there's nothing new that way.
What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing.
They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail.
He said, oh, sir, it's much worse than that. We're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years.
He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs from the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years. starting with
Iraq, then Syria, Lebanon, Libya,
Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran. I said, is it classified? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, don't show it to me.
And as you can see, that shopping list is exactly what we've been doing for the past 15 years. Israeli military intelligence created Al-Qaeda. They created the Islamic foe for the war on terror. Because if you're going to have a big war on terror, you have to have an enemy. So they have to create the enemy.
In my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in, to kind of catapult the propaganda. Iraq, with Iraq, Iraqi people, Iraq. They were. What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing.
The story about
Nothing, Collin.
Nothing.
So yeah, a little George W. for everybody. A little remix. Yep.
I miss him in a way.
A little bit, right? I mean, just for the humor.
The humor alone. It's like.
But wait, there's more. Here we go. In action.
Benjamin Netanyahu admits that 9/11 benefits Israel. He said on 9/11 to the New York Times, he was asked, how will this affect Israeli-American relations? And Netanyahu said, it's very good. It will generate immediate sympathy. Who would say it's very good when there are 30,000 people who were thought to be in the rubble dead? A couple years later, he said in Hebrew, speaking to an Israeli audience, he said, we are benefiting from one thing, and that is the attack on the Twin Towers and Pentagon and the American struggle in Iraq.
What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing.
Now, what's the connection between Larry Silverstein and the buildings? Well, the Port Authority owned the World Trade Center. The Port Authority was headed by this man, Lou Eisenberg, another Zionist. There were some very convoluted negotiations in the summer of 2001, and the World Trade Center passed to Larry Silverstein. These two men are on the board of the United Jewish Appeal, the largest funding organization for the state of Israel in the United States of America. So it was the Zionist connection that got the building to Larry Silverstein. Larry Silverstein, on July 24th, he got the Twin Towers in his hand, and then he controlled everything about the building. The first thing he did was he jacked the rent up 40% and insured it against terrorism. This is what was left 5 weeks later of the World Trade Center. All that was left was steel and dust.
Elliot Spitzer, an old friend who I knew well. And I said, Elliot, if you don't help me, I'll never collect from the insurance companies.
To the tune of what?
He listened.
$12.3 billion.
And he said, you know what? You're
I
entitled.
thought you were going to play Austin for that.
He was already, I don't even need that. It was Dr. Evil himself already. At 4.6 billion.
Oh, you got to play a Dr. Evil clip for that.
I know, right? I could get to it. It's definitely needed. 12.3 billion with a B, billion, right? In damages, right? When he had already won 4.6.
I'm going to get you the money. And in 6 months, he got me the $4.5 billion.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull. And then we watched the building collapse.
That's building 7.
See what's happening down there is a mess. And the developer is actually a friend of mine, but he didn't want to build this building either. If you look back at the records, I mean, when it was first foisted upon him, Larry Silverstein is a great guy. He's a good guy. He's a friend of mine.
Larry Silverstein is a great guy. He's a good guy. He's a friend of mine.
Then
So yes, the duopoly continues to duople. Yep. Is that it, or I got one more? I think that might be it. Yep, that's it. So back to this Klarenberg article, right? To finish up, the question of whether foreknowledge of the 9/11 attacks motivated insider trading was, at the time, treated with the utmost urgency by Western government officials, regulators, law enforcement, and the media. Open source records showed companies adversely affected by the event were abruptly shorted at record levels in the weeks prior, while investments in stocks that stood to benefit rocketed on September 10th. The purchases of shares of U.S. weapons manufacturer Raytheon inexplicably soared sixfold. A week later, their value had almost doubled. The profits involved both ways were huge. As a contemporary mainstream report notes, 5 days before 9/11, over 2,000 short bets totaling 180,000 were made against United Airlines, 90 times more in a single day than in the prior 3 weeks. The company's stock collapsed once the World Trade Center was struck, and the value of the investment skyrocketed to $2.4 million. This was just one example of suspicious activity among many investigated by U.S. authorities. That's just United Airlines. Over shorting one company, $2.4 million in profit were made. Like, elsewhere, probes into the matter were launched in several European countries and seemingly produced quick results. On September 24th that year, Belgium's finance minister said investigations had already led to strong suspicions that British markets may have been used for insider trading pre-9/11. The same day, Germany's central bank president forcefully declared, "What we found makes us sure that people connected to the terrorists must have been trying to profit from this tragedy." Yet, like the SEC's, these investigations ultimately failed to produce results. I wonder why, Care Bear. Yeah. The 9/11 Commission report summarily dismissed this issue altogether on the perplexing ground that individuals identified as responsible for the trades had no ties to Al-Qaeda, which had been previously what, Care Bear? What was the Al-Qaeda called before then? The Brave Freedom Fighters of the Mujahideen. Just in case you watched Rambo.
No.
It literally says that. Like, they changed it now, but the old Rambo literally had like a thing saying like dedicated to the brave warriors of the Mujahideen. But yeah, so a declassified 2003 FBI document assessing suspicious pre-9/11 trades reveals who at least two of these investors were, while providing a likely explanation for why authorities did not aggressively pursue the issue. One of the trades examined by the Bureau was the purchase of 56,000 shares of Stratosec between September 6th and September 10th. The company provided security systems to airports, including New York City's Duals, from where one of the hijacked planes departed. United Airlines, which suffered 2 hijackings on 9/11 in the World Trade Center, its share price almost doubled following the attacks. The trades trace back to Wirt D. Walker III, a distant relative of the Bush family and business partner of Marvin Bush, then President George W. Bush's brother. According to the declassified file, the FBI never bothered to interview him about the trades, ostensibly as their background investigation revealed, no ties to terrorism or other negative information. But ties to what, though, Care Bear? In the wake of Hamas' October 7th incursion into Israel, shock and bewilderment abounded widely. Many reeled at the astonishing intelligence failure, undoubtedly necessary to allow the attack to slip through the most monstrous and deadly concentration camp walls ever constructed. Multiple Israeli and Western spying veterans with intimate insider knowledge of Tel Aviv's modern surveillance and security systems expressed disbelief. Collin, do you remember lines along the lack of imagination during 9/11? That we just had a lack of imagination. We couldn't have imagined any terrorist thing like this. We just couldn't have done it. Except multiple people had imagined such a thing. Yes.
And it happened in a similar way several years before. It obviously didn't. And people forgot this is not the first time that World Trade Center was targeted.
No. In fact, in Joe's video, there's a whole section on that alone. About how Bibi Netanyahu said that next it's going to be a nuclear bomb, which is why they stopped Iran from having nukes.
Like it was targeted. If I remember, I don't remember the dates, but like I know, like it had to be even like when I was in middle school, high school in the mid 90s.
Yep.
That time it really wasn't.
Kim Jong-un said to look at Iran's agreement during the nuclear accords. Right. And to see how we still went in and controlled them, and Israel did this, that, and the other during that. And that's why they need to keep their nukes. Right. Like that's what that guy said. But this is this again, lack of imagination. Right. So, yeah, just craziness. So, let alone take the Israeli government by such apparent surprise. Like, there's no way. They knew. But meanwhile, they know where every tunnel is and can make detailed animations. You know, like, even Hamas operatives themselves were reportedly stunned by their success. They had not expected to be able to push so far into Tel Aviv. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. Biden is known for saying that October 7th was 15 9/11s classically. So I wonder if his math is accurate. you know what I mean? Like just in a different way. So, and by the numbers, he might be right. It might be 15 9/11s about all the money these people are making. So Palestinians and their supporters have reasonably argued that Israel forces are a paper tiger, accustomed since their embarrassing 2006 expulsion from Lebanon to brutal imperialist crackdowns against unarmed civilians and ill-equipped for actual battle against a well-trained insurgent force, which we are seeing day by day that is the case. Right? I know Fee was the one who told me paper tiger. So yet on an almost daily basis since October 7th, report after report has made it abundantly clear that Tel Aviv was given countless warnings and possessed intelligence, meaning its vast security and military apparatus duties should have seen the attack coming. This begs the obvious question of why that didn't happen. To detail just two recent examples, on November 30th, the New York Times revealed how Israeli officials obtained a detailed 40-page battle plan outlining in precise detail, point by point, Operation Alaska Flood over a year before it happened. Meanwhile, it now seems that mere hours before Hamas struck, Israeli security forces had enough warning signs of what was impending to prepare a response, but did nothing and told no one, including attendees of the Nova Music Festival and its organizers, that Israel then proceeded to shoot with their own tanks. So the author of this article makes no comment on theories that Operation Alaska Flood was actively permitted to go ahead by Tel Aviv to secure pretext for executing the horrific genocide currently unfolding in Gaza. The attack's success may well be attributable to Israel's complacency and a genuine intelligence failure of epic proportions. However, countless indications that so many knew something was brewing for so long, including foreign governments and intelligence agencies, raises the prospect that someone or some individuals with prior knowledge of Operation Alaska Flood sought to capitalize accordingly. While Wirt D. Walker III, for example, almost undoubtedly played no personal role in planning or executing 9/11 or allowing it to happen. No, he would never. His privileged position and connections may have granted him access to sensitive information inaccessible to the average person. Hell of a coinkydink, huh? Al-Aqsa. Indy wants to fix my pronunciation. Probing such connections and information is not something regulators and law enforcement agencies across the Western world are in the business of doing, about which shadowy actors and agencies are, of course, well aware. Tension, unrest, and cataclysmic events worldwide dependently send shares in major defense firms surging and often illuminate the forces responsible, tracking which stocks are suffering, where and when, and whether anyone has sought to profit as a result may be just as incisive. Ever any thoughts?
Oh, that's a lot.
Yes, it is, and it's a lot of dots to connect. Yeah.
But I mean, I didn't want to talk about obviously 9/11. I said this to you yesterday as we were prepping that it will trigger some people. It kind of triggers me still a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think it just kind of goes to show. I think even now, 20 years, over 20 years later, like we still don't know entirely like what really is the deal.
No.
With 9/11, but it definitely seems.
Well, and especially
I'm gonna say
Saudi
allegedly,
connections,
right? But I'm gonna say allegedly for this, but wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the Israeli lobby coming into play even in this, and so. But again, we said this. I feel like we say this every week. It's just crazy to see the hand that the Israel lobby has in everything in terms of foreign policy, in terms even, I hate saying this in this way, but even in terms of our terrorism as well, like, you know,
war on
like,
terror,
right? Like, where doesn't Israel doesn't have their hand?
Well, we talked about that with the Jerusalem conference, right? Where books made by them, funded by them, with their bad information passed down through Daddy Bush and Reagan, right? You know, particularly, I think it's I forget the name of the book. But there was a book passed around the CIA, essentially, where the CIA was all like, this shit's bullshit, but, you know, whatever. And then publicly, they were using it all the time to influence how they were going about doing things, including the Sandinistas and, you know, so, and, you know, fighting the commies, right? Reagan,
right.
80s Reagan shit. 90s Bush shit. Early noughties Bush shit. So, you know, now we're here. Obama continued it. Took 2 wars, made them 7. Remember how many countries? How many countries did that guy rattle off? What was it? 7? Took 2 wars, made them 7? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure, you know, then we had Trump, you know, and then we had Biden, who's now continuing all that. So, yeah. Hell of a timeline, no? Yep.
And it started in the 60s, more or less. Well, you can argue since the 40s, but really kicked off in the 60s.
Tell us what you think. Leave a comment right down there in that little comment section. Please share. We're heavily suppressed, as I'm sure you could find out with listening to this clip. But, you know, like and subscribe. We can only do what we can. Try to get us to 2K. We're almost there. We're at 1.7. So we're getting there. Also, go to Rumble. Subscribe there. You can find all our links, including links to all of our alternative platforms, at indienews.network. So, yeah, anything to say on the way out?
Merry Christmas to all.
Yep. indienews.shop.
Buy our merch.
Happy holidays. Happy Hanukkah, which I think might have ended.
Hanukkah is over.
Yep.
It's over.
And then Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa still happening? I don't know how Kwanzaa works, but sure.
Kind of like Hanukkah. It's kind of.
Okay.
But not until next week. Next Tuesday's start of Hanukkah.
So, yeah, rumble.com/c/Indie News Network for Rumble. Indy putting the links in chat. We'll try to get links in our descriptions fixed. We'll figure that out.